I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to have you on my podcast. For the first part, can you please explain a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Yeah, totally. My name is Matthew Silar. I'm an equity stage manager in the Chicagoland area, and I'm also a director.
That's awesome. What got you into stage managing?
Yeah, I didn't know what a stage manager was until probably college. Part of the program that I was in, I was a directing and acting student in my university program, and part of the requirements for that were we had to stage manage a show, in order to graduate. And then the other part of the program was you worked in different shops and things like that. And so I ASM'd, which is assistant stage managed, my first show, my sophomore year, I think, of college, and found out this is a cool way to be in a rehearsal room. And so we call it PSMing or production stage managing. And the term production stage manager and stage manager can kind of be used interchangeably in the regional setting, which is the market that I work in. In the Broadway setting, they're a bit more specific. But so I stage managed or production stage managed, whatever you want to call it, for the first time. And as somebody who's also a director and an artist, it kept me in the room. It kept me working with directors, watching good directors, and like actively contributing to shows. So whereas, students usually work on a show or two a year, right? Maybe one show a semester. I was leaving school having worked on 3 or 4 shows a year because I just kept stage managing and I just kept fluctuating between those. And I worked on a show every semester. I didn't need to wait to get cast. There were semesters where I got cast and was stage managing, or where I directed and was stage managing. So it just like kept me in the room and kept me practicing all throughout my undergrad. And now has really been in this regional market, sort of my foot in the door to a lot of other opportunities because I spend so much time in the room with all of these different artists all over Chicago.
Yeah, that's awesome. What has been your favorite show you've stage managed and your favorite show you've directed, and why?
So my favorite show that I've stage managed, I have like a twofold answer to that. A couple months ago now, I worked on a new deaf integrated production of Spring Awakening, similar to the Deaf West production, but not a replica production of that. And I did that at a theater called Skylight Theater in Milwaukee. And for that, working on a deaf production, working with a variety of artists of different abilities and backgrounds. The team for that was so cool. It was co-directed by Michael Unger, who was the original director of the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee before it transferred to Broadway, and Alexandria Wales, who was is sort of like the main player in the deaf theater world. I think the title was ASL captain, but she worked on Coda, like the Oscar-winning film. um she is just sort of like leading that world. I collaborated with a woman named Annie Wygand, who was our lighting designer. She's a deaf lighting designer who was an associate designer on the Broadway production of Spring Awakening. Like, it was just this crazy cool room of hearing artists and deaf artists, and I learned so much about accessibility, and also I just like picked up a bunch of tools for what I do outside of deaf theater now. When accessible rooms benefit everybody, not just disabled folks. And so just the way I communicate is different because of that process. Uh, but it wasn't a terribly busy show. And as a stage manager, when a show is really busy, time sort of flies. And so I did a production of School of Rock at the Paramount Theater in Aurora, which is a large
Yeah,
regional theater in
yeah,
Chicago.
great
Did
show.
you see it?
Yeah, my friend Elias
Yeah.
was in it.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I stage managed that as well. And that show was just crazy. Like, we had a turntable and automated lifts and 3 different video surfaces. And it just like, I didn't stop talking while calling that show. And so, like the adrenaline from that is a highlight.
Yeah,
So that would be, yeah, those two.
that's great. What is the hardest part about being a stage manager in a big theater like Paramount?
Again, I'm going to give you a twofold answer. One is just the logistics. I remember sitting in my seat at first tech of School of Rock, and the production manager at the time looked over to me, and I was, just sitting. Look, you've been there. That this theater is massive, right? I had friends who came to see. Um, I'm currently stage managing their production of The Full Monty, and I had three friends who came to the show last night who had never seen a Paramount show before. And you've seen it. Like I mean, it's big. There's big sets. It's very sort of classical musical theater, but it is not. It's not the most technically advanced production Paramount has done or that I've worked on. It's a lot of flown scenery and rolling pieces and things like that. But they were just like floored. Like they were like, "What does something like that cost?" And I was like, "Something like that. Wait till you see Frozen next." Like
Oh,
yeah. So, but I sat in my seat for School of Rock, and the production manager looked over to me, and she just goes, "Matt, everybody who sat in your seat has felt how you feel. We will get you there." Um, and I didn't believe it at the time, but now I believe it in every theater I sit in. Like we'll get there. And so it's just big, there's a lot going on at one time. You have to have eyes everywhere. For that show, I think I had three or four different camera views that I was watching besides the actual stage. You're just, your left hand is clicking buttons while your voice is saying one thing and your right hand is turning a page. Like it's just a lot of multitasking. And when we call it learning the call. When you're learning a call of a show like that, it, just a very new skill. Yeah, so I think that, but then the flip side, and again, the show I'm working on right now, the Full Monty, it is not exclusively about these male strippers, but that is a part of what the show's about. So there's a level of like intimacy and safety that as a stage manager, and also when I'm directing, I'm a part of, but as a stage manager, I'm there the whole time. And part of my job is to make sure that the theater stays a safe space for actors, there's no other job where people have to kiss each other or
yeah,
undress,
yeah,
like that's not really a thing. I mean, very few.
yeah. And so have you acted as well or just stage managed?
Yeah, I started as an acting student.
And so what advice would you give to to actors who want to also do stage managing, who want to start doing stage managing?
I mean, I think pay attention, right? Anytime you're in a rehearsal room and there are multiple jobs going on, uh, any time one catches your eye, pay attention to it. Ask questions about it. Uh, Buy your stage manager coffee, meaning like go sit down with them and buy them coffee. Don't just like drop. I mean, sure, drop them off a coffee, please, by all means. But like, I think a lot of people end up working in this industry in jobs other than acting, but they started acting because that's what you can do at your school. That's what you can do at the local community theater or the children's theater in the area. Like you can act, right? Maybe you can work backstage. Um, but that's sort of our first exposure. So if you have an interest in stage managing, directing, designing, anything like that, and you are an actor, start building relationships with people who are doing that. Which is what I do as a stage manager who also directs, right? Is I'm building relationships with directors and with artistic directors, and sort of we're building these connections where they learn that I stage manage, but then I also am an artist in these other capacities.
That's awesome. And so are you going to be involved with Frozen?
I'm not involved with Frozen. My
No.
next show at Paramount is across the street. I'm doing 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee
Oh, I'm
at
super excited
Copley
for that one. I love
later this.
Putnam County. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
one. And so, what theater is one? What theaters are your favorite in the Chicagoland area, and why?
I mean, of course, I've got a soft spot for Paramount, just because I've done the most work there. As far as seeing theater goes, I grew up a Chicago theater kid. I grew up a regional kid. Like this is my market. Um, and so I grew up going to Marriott shows. I grew up right wondering how they were going to adapt these big musicals for Marriott's in the round, so there's audience on every side. And so I love seeing shows there because it's so nostalgic and homey. And I've worked there a little, not a ton, but I have worked there. Um, And I love Steppenwolf. I love the work that Steppenwolf does. It's also so like quintessential Chicago, you know. Like if you're a Chicago theater artist, there are sort of we call the like these like bucket list theaters that I'm every time I get to interview with Chicago Shakes or Steppenwolf or Goodman, like it's, those are like bucket list theaters when you grow up in this community.
That's awesome. And so, what advice would you have to your younger self?
I have several thoughts about that. The first is not what you would expect. I would tell my younger self to start a sport because I am and was and will forever be a theater kid. And I think we grow up um being told that like arts are for the non-athletes, right? And then there's the athletics and we can go back and forth about like what's cool and what's not, But the fact of the matter is there's movement, there's ways of using my body that make me feel so good now that I have them in my life. Now that I'm a physically active person, now that I have a sport that I love, and it like you grow up a theater kid, and I say kid is a very loose term, right? Theater
Yeah.
kid for whatever age. Um, and it is it's this like really locked in ecosystem, right? Where like and you feel it like it's belonging, right? You feel like you have these friends and these people who get what you get. You all like the same shows, you like the same music, you don't like the same things, you don't like the same people. But ultimately the art that we do, like we want it to be for everybody, like as theater people, we want athletes and people outside of our industry to come and enjoy the work that we do because we're trying to tell stories about everybody for everybody. Um, and we see that we're The Outsiders won Best Musical this year, right? That show is filled with like I know someone in that show. I have a friend of mine is in that show. Like that show is filled with like frat boy gym rats. Like,
Yeah.
but they love theater. They love telling stories. But and they're dancers. They're athletes. Like our industry is better when everybody in it has an empathy for as much of the world as possible. So I would tell myself that. And then I also would just tell myself to be patient because getting into this industry takes a lot of time. And, I still have a lot of imposter syndrome, and I'm sure I will 10 years from now when my career is even more established and looks different than it does now. Um, yeah, so patience. And then I think the last thing I would also say would be, and maybe this is more a PSA for, I mean, that's the point of the question, right? Is for younger
Yeah.
people, but um, you high school, college, early 20s, early career professionals, like it's now is the time where it's not you don't have to be embarrassed about asking for that coffee, for that advice. Be ready and willing and gracious if people say no, but like nobody bats an eye if a 21-year-old is like, hey, do you need an assistant for that project? Or hey, would I be able to take you out for a coffee or a drink? Or like that's the age to do that. And a lot of professionals are really excited to sow into the next. I have people ask me to shadow at Paramount. My answer is yes, 100% of the time, right? Like if an early career stage manager wants to come and watch a show the size that we do in Chicago be called, like please come. I'm so happy to do it. It's like less cute when you're 35, you know? It's like less cute and I'm not 35 yet, but I'm in my 30s and like it's you know people are less inclined to be like, yeah, let me sit down with this like early career 31-year-old
Yeah.
than they are when you're a teenager or in your early 20s.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so that's the interview today. I'd like to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. You were like such an attentive interviewer. I appreciate it.